Okay, guys, I know you have this note set. I'm going to cover Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft in one note set, and then cover Wilson in another note set, and talking about why these guys changed from the Gilded Age to the Progressive Movement. We know Theodore Roosevelt was actually the vice president under McKinley. McKinley was forced to unite the ticket, and there have been some issues of Roosevelt as governor and as a legislator of New York that he was doing too much progressivism. And so they asked the Republican Party to put him somewhere where he would have no voice. And so they thought the dead end job for him was vice president. So he unites the Republican ticket, and he's McKinley's vice president. Many people said nothing would happen to McKinley. McKinley was so popular, nothing could possibly happen to him. But Mark Hanna will make the comment, there's only a bullet between that cowboy and the presidency. And McKinley gets shot. McKinley gets shot at a fair. The doctors at this time cannot find the bullet, and McKinley will die. And so that's how we know that Roosevelt comes to office. He gets to office as being vice president, McKinley being shot. But then we go back to this comment about what Mark Hanna said. Mark Hanna says there's only a bullet between the cowboy and the presidency. And it's because of McKinley's death that the Gilded Age ends, and we are ushered into an era of progressivism. So let's look at Roosevelt's background. Roosevelt was police commissioner of New York City. He was a governor. He becomes Assistant Secretary of the Navy. The moment the Spanish-American War breaks out, he leaves his post, and he creates a group of people known as the Rough Riders that we'll talk about in chapter 27. I have to talk about how he became a cowboy. So we're going to go to February 14th. February 14th, his daughter is about 2 days old, Alice. He's called home because his mother, Mittie, has died of typhoid fever. On his ride home, he knows that his wife, Alice, is also having some issues. She has Bright's disease, and she's been suffering from childbirth, and she dies too. So on February 14th, his mom dies, and within a few hours, his wife dies. He is left with his daughter, Alice. Mom was named Alice, daughter's named Alice, and his heart is broken. And he's sitting there on February 14th. Mom died, wife died, and he decides that he's going to move west. And this is how he becomes a cowboy. When he moves west, he moves into the Dakotas. He's exposed to what is going on with the Native Americans, what is going on with big business exploiting the resources of the West, that is going to cause him to change. Okay, we will eventually talk about in chapter 27 about him being a hero of the Battle of San Juan Hill. But what we're going to look at is, what is his goals? How does he change from what we see in the Gilded Age? We see his goals is he sees that there's a lot of revolution. There's a lot of labor unions really upset about lack of pay, the lack of good working conditions, the lack of respect from their businesses to improve their lot. And this is causing many people to turn to socialism. And he says, look, we need to meet halfway. We got to avoid the revolution and socialism. He says we have to have reform. We can't be in the hands of business and expect America to do well without adhering to what the common man needs. He also wants to get away from the Gilded Age, where we were giving people positions in the spoil system that were not qualified. He wants to persuade well-trained, dedicated men to serve in government positions to bring about reform. He wants to educate the average citizen as well, and he wants to regulate and restrict the businesses using his persuasion and avoid using the court system. He wants to check the power of the courts. And so what he will do to get this done is he's going to compromise with Congress, give in to their demands, seek concessions. He's going to take control of the Republican Party out of the political boss, Mark Hanna's hands. Remember that guy that was really upset that said there's only a bullet between that cowboy and the presidency? He wants to be a hero of the people. His style is a lot different than what we've seen of our Gilded Age presidents. He's out there. He talks to the people. He has discourse with them. He's a common man president. He's going to recognize the needs of the special interest groups such as labor, such as women. And he's going to appoint people who are well qualified to government positions. He's going to press Congress for legislation. We had not seen a president ask Congress of much. So we're going to see the power of the president expand. So his whole deal of how to get things done is when he campaigns, he's going to say that I'm campaigning for a square deal, for capital, which we know capital is business, for labor, and the public at large, consumers. We're seeing that the Gilded Age was always in the hands of capital, business. But the square deal is going to include labor, who before have been complaining for things, and business to deal with them, and the public. We've seen the muckrakers write several novels exploiting the corruption of businesses at the expense of the consumer. And so the TR is going to have his 3 C's. One is control of corporations. The next one is consumer protection and conservation. But what we're going to look at first is how does he decide to control corporations? Because corporations have been controlling our government. Our first incident breaks out in the winter of 1902. And it is a devastating winter. And what has happened is the coal miners have decided to go on strike. What they were asking for was a 20% increase in pay and a 9-hour workday. And these demands don't get met. The workers decided to strike. They're striking. And it's the dead of winter, and they're kind of important at this time. Coal runs our homes. And so because of the strike, TR requests both labor and business to come to DC. Never before have we seen the president actually consider labor as a bargaining chip. Usually what we've seen in the Gilded Age is the government goes in and sides with business and forces labor to go to work. And if they don't want to meet, Theodore Roosevelt threatens to take over the mines. And we see a compromise is achieved. This is the first time that labor actually gets a government entity on their side. They're going to get a 10% pay increase and a 9-hour workday. This is a departure from the Gilded Age where the government was in the hands of business. There's another thing that is created at the time is the Department of Labor and Commerce and the Bureau of Corporations. Their whole purpose is to reconcile the problems between labor and business. The Department of Labor deals with the labor issues, and the Bureau of Corporations starts to probe business engaged in interstate commerce to make sure they're adhering to the Sherman Antitrust Act. Roosevelt is going to be known as a trust buster, that he's going to bust up trusts, monopolies. And he's going to have a rule of reason. His rule of reason, a good trust, has a moral conscience. They care about their workers, they care about their consumers, and are very conscientious about what they do. A bad trust is doing something for power and money. So like what we saw in the jungle, Roosevelt would have considered that a bad trust. So he's going to get Congress to come in and administer some rules. The first one is the Elkins Act. And I always remember Elkins, Elkins rebates. And it's going to forbid railroads from giving out rebates to big businesses, that discounts to them. The Hepburn Act is going to prevent the railroads from giving out free passes to business. And he's going to use these 2 rules to take down Northern Securities. Northern Securities Company is a monopoly in the Northeast, and Theodore Roosevelt will use the Supreme Court to say that they're violating antitrust laws. And Northern Securities will be forced to dissolve, which would lead to competition, which would lead to lower prices. So again, he's attacking business, so he is a trust buster. Because of the jungle, Roosevelt is going to go to Congress saying that we need to create some legislation to protect the consumers. The first one is the Meat Inspection Act, which says we will inspect any meat that will be transported in interstate commerce. The second one is the Pure Food and Drug Act. The Pure Food and Drug Act prevents the alteration and mislabeling of foods. And this will eventually be the precursor for the FDA of what we know. The other part of his C was conservation. Remember, Roosevelt, after his wife died, moves west after his mom dies, and he's going to be exposed to what is going on in the West. And he's going to pass the Reclamation Act of the Forest. He's going to send 125 million acres, and this will eventually lead to the creation of the national parks. The Newlands Act allows the government to sell land, and with the sale of that land, to start irrigation process. Roosevelt has done a lot, and he will be elected in his own right in 1904. A panic will set in 1907, and again, they happen every 20 years, but many people blame Roosevelt. They said because of his trust-busting practices, businesses are not making money, because of the regulations, and bank runs happen. People are going to go and get their gold and silver, and this leads to the depletion and depreciation of our dollar at this time. TR's legacy. He's going to enlarge the power of the presidency. In the Gilded Age, we saw that the government was in the hands of the business. He's going to reverse that. He's going to be on the side of consumers and the side of labor, and also he's going to not totally be against business. He's going to say, but they're not going to be in the hands of government. He's going to shape the progressive movement at the national level. He launches hopes for consumers and labor. And eventually in the imperialism unit, we'll see that he makes the U.S. a world power. He's going to serve his 2 terms, and his vice president will come in and serve as president. William Howard Taft has a lot of similarities to Roosevelt. They're both history buffs. They both were part of the Navy. And we're going to see Taft won't fill up what Roosevelt had done. Taft is really going to get Roosevelt upset. And so we're going to see Taft is actually going to be a bigger trust buster than Roosevelt. He's going to break up over 90 trusts. And his rule of reason is that anybody that interferes with interstate commerce is violating the law. He's going to go after Standard Oil. Standard Oil, we know, own 95% of the oil industry, and he's going to force it to be dissolved. U.S. Steel, which we know Carnegie had owned, is going to sell to Morgan. Roosevelt had previously given his blessing to this business, saying it was a good trust. Taft will use the court and the Sherman Antitrust Act to break it up. Some other reforms that we have at this time is the 16th Amendment, the graduate income tax. And this is one of the things that y'all are affected by, is actually created as a national law. At this time, we saw it during the Civil War. And then we see the direct election of senators. The senators are no longer elected by their state legislators. The people get to elect them. We're going to see that there's going to be some issues between Roosevelt and Taft. Roosevelt is really upset that he breaks up U.S. Steel. Roosevelt is also going to be upset that the Payne-Aldrich tariff comes out. Taft was supposed to lower the tariff, but it's actually an upward revision. There's only one time in U.S. history that we have the tariff go down. It is called the Underwood tariff. And even in its name, Underwood, it kind of explains it going down. But there's going to be a huge fight between conservationists. And it's this fight between Bollinger and Pinchot. Bollinger is going to be the Secretary of the Interior, and he wants to sell public lands that have oil on it to business. This really upsets Pinchot, who wants to preserve nature. And remember I told you that Roosevelt moved out west and he met some very influential people such as Muir and Pinchot. Pinchot is really one of Roosevelt's friends because he helped him get out through a tough time. Pinchot gets very upset that Secretary Bollinger is selling this land, and he had some words with Taft that are not becoming of a person in a professional position. And Taft gets upset and fires him. This sets off Roosevelt. Roosevelt can't believe that Taft he's ruining his legacy. So Roosevelt will challenge Taft to the Republican nomination in 1912. We're going to look more about the 1912 election when I get to the Wilson notes.